All right, so get ready because today we're taking a deep dive into a case that has everyone glued to their screens, asking themselves, what really happened?
Oh, yeah, this one, the case of Caylee Anthony.
We're going to be going through all the twists and turns from the Wikipedia article about her death.
It's a story that really captured the nation's attention.
And it sparked media frenzies, left everyone questioning, really questioning what truly happened.
What makes this case so fascinating, I think, is that it's not just a tragic event.
Right.
It really raises questions about media influence.
Yeah.
How reliable forensic science can be.
Yeah.
And even how we wrap our heads around the idea of truth.
When it doesn't all make sense.
When the pieces just don't seem to fit.
Okay, so let's set the scene. June 16th, 2008, a seemingly ordinary day in Orlando, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Caylee Anthony. She's 2 years old. She's seen leaving her grandparents' house with her mom, Casey.
Right.
And then she vanishes.
Gone. And for a whole 31 days.
Yeah.
Before anybody reports her missing.
It's actually Kaylee's grandmother, Cindy, who makes that 911 call.
That's right.
But even that call adds to the mystery.
Absolutely.
Because initially, Cindy tells the operator that Casey's car smells like a dead body's been inside.
Oh, wow.
Later, she kind of walks back that statement.
She does.
But with that chilling detail already out there, it casts a dark shadow over the investigation right from the beginning.
Right away.
And then there's Casey's behavior. She doesn't just say, I don't know where Caylee is.
Nope.
She spins a whole web of stories.
She does, yeah.
First, she claims that Caylee is with a nanny.
Right.
A nanny named Zanny.
Zanny.
And later it turns out Zanny's completely made up.
Totally fabricated.
Police go to the apartment where Zanny supposedly lived.
Yeah.
Vacant for months.
Empty.
And then it gets even wilder.
Wait, really?
Casey also claims she was working at Universal Studios. And guess what? That job never existed either.
Oh.
So it becomes pretty clear that this is more than a simple missing child case.
Definitely.
The police see through the lies, and Casey quickly becomes the prime suspect. Now, bring in the media.
Oh, yeah.
They smell a story that's going to keep viewers hooked.
Totally.
Especially Nancy Grace.
Yes.
She makes these nightly pronouncements, shaping public opinion about Casey with her commentary.
And this is crucial, right? The media's role in this case is undeniable.
Huge.
It's not just reporting the news. They are actively shaping the narrative.
Absolutely.
Creating this atmosphere of suspicion around Casey.
Before the trial even starts.
Exactly.
And then months after Caylee disappears, the worst possible news breaks. Her skeletal remains are found
Oh, gosh.
in a wooded area near the Anthony family home.
That changes everything.
Devastating discovery, right? It completely shifts the focus of the investigation from where is Caylee to how did she die?
Absolutely. And that's not all.
What else?
There's a detail that it adds to the horror of it all.
Okay.
Duct tape found near the skull.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's chilling.
So immediately, the question becomes, was this a tragic accident? Or something far more sinister?
Right.
The prosecution lays out their theory.
Oh.
They say that Casey, desperate for freedom, wanting a life without the responsibilities of being a parent, they say that she used chloroform to sedate Caylee and then suffocated her with that duct tape.
So their case, it's largely built on circumstantial evidence.
Okay.
Deleted computer searches, looking up chloroform.
Right.
Alerts from those cadaver dogs that reacted to the trunk of Casey's car.
Yeah.
And then those kind of controversial air sampling tests.
Okay.
All suggesting the possibility of a decomposing body having been in that trunk.
So you've got all that, but then the defense comes back with a shocking claim of their own.
Oh, wow.
They argue that Caylee actually drowned.
Drowned?
In the family pool.
Oh, my God.
And that her grandfather, George Anthony, panicked, covered it up.
Oh, wow.
And that Casey knew about this.
That's a huge twist.
Right. It shifts the focus from just Casey to the whole family dynamic.
Yeah, and this idea of a dark secret.
Hidden at the heart of it all.
Right.
Now, about those air sampling tests.
Yeah.
They were definitely a key piece of evidence for the prosecution.
They were.
But as with anything in forensic science, it's not as simple as test says this, so it must be true.
Not at all.
Right.
No.
That's complicated.
So these tests, they analyze the air for specific compounds.
Okay.
The stuff that gets released as the body decomposes.
Ah.
But the defense argued this type of testing was brand new.
Mm-hmm.
It hadn't been used in a criminal case before.
Oh, wow.
So they questioned, was it really reliable enough
Yeah.
to actually convict someone based on the results alone?
Okay, that makes sense.
You can't base a whole case on something So new,
Right.
untested.
And then there's that hair analysis.
Oh, right.
So experts, they found something called root banding in Caylee's hair.
And this detail, it could be really significant. The expert who testified suggested that this root banding,
Yeah.
it could point to postmortem changes to the hair.
Oh, wow.
So if that's true, it'd really back up the prosecution's timeline,
Okay.
you know, when things happen.
Right, right.
But then the defense calls a witness, Crystal Holloway, and she drops a bomb.
What was that?
She claims to have had an affair with George Anthony.
Oh, wow.
And not just an affair, she alleges that he admitted to her that Caylee's death was an accident that spiraled out of control.
Wow. So he knew.
That's what she claims.
Wow.
Now, of course, George denied the affair and this supposed confession,
Right.
but it throws a wrench into the prosecution's case, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Throws suspicion back onto the whole Anthony family.
It's like we're back to square one.
Kind of, yeah.
So we have these conflicting accounts, questionable forensic evidence,
Right.
and a family tangled up in secrets.
Oh, yeah.
It makes you wonder, what's a jury supposed to make of all of this?
I mean, that's the question that hung over the whole trial.
Yeah.
Could the prosecutors really weave a strong enough story
From all these pieces.
from these fragments? Yeah.
Because this case, by this point, had become a national obsession.
Oh, yeah. He was everywhere.
It wasn't just playing out in that courtroom.
No.
It was playing out in living rooms all across America.
It was. Fueled by the 24/7 news and
Yeah.
all that speculation online.
Absolutely.
It's a prime example of how media can shape what people think.
Oh, totally. Every single detail,
Right.
every witness, every piece of evidence.
Analyzed and debated.
Endless opinions, strong opinions.
It feels almost impossible to separate what happened in the courtroom
Right.
from all that media frenzy around it.
Absolutely.
And in the middle of all of that,
Yeah.
all that noise, the jury had to figure out the facts, weigh the evidence, and decide if the prosecution had really proven their case.
Beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. Beyond a reasonable doubt. And after weeks of testimony, mountains of evidence, they came back with their verdict.
And it was.
Not guilty on the murder charges.
Wow. I mean, that sent shockwaves through everyone.
People were outraged.
Protests, social media, it just exploded.
It was like the O.J. Simpson trial all over again.
Yeah. Another case where someone, seemingly obvious suspect, was acquitted.
Right.
It sparked that debate about race, about justice, about whether the whole system was failing.
And it really felt like most of the public thought Casey was guilty.
They did.
So how did the jury reach a different conclusion?
Well, it's important to remember the jury's decision was based on what they heard and saw in the courtroom.
In that room, yeah.
And they were told to apply that standard beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Clearly, the prosecution's case, while compelling, must have left them with some doubt.
Some room for doubt.
We can guess why, but we weren't there in that jury room.
We weren't in their heads. But they did find Casey guilty on 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement.
Right, those lies.
Those lies about the nanny, about the job,
They all came back.
came back to haunt her.
They did, and that shows, I think, that the jury, they recognized how dishonest she'd been. Her attempts to derail the whole investigation.
Yeah, and even if they weren't convinced she was directly responsible for Caylee's death,
Right.
they held her accountable for those actions, for those lies.
She did serve time for those convictions, though a lot less than many thought she deserved.
And that difference between what the public thought and the legal outcome
Yeah.
really highlights the complexities of the justice system.
Absolutely. And it also shows the power of narrative.
Okay.
The prosecution had a strong narrative, but it was built on circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
The defense managed to plant those seeds of doubt, to offer alternative explanations, and that created space for the jury to question the prosecution's version of events.
And this case, it didn't just end with that verdict.
It didn't?
There was a huge push for stricter laws about reporting missing children.
Oh, yeah.
Caylee's Law.
I remember that.
A number of states passed laws requiring parents to report a child's disappearance within a certain time frame.
It's tragic it took such a high-profile case to bring attention to that issue.
It's awful.
But Caylee's death did lead to some positive changes
Yeah, at least something good came from it.
in how we protect vulnerable children.
And of course, we can't forget the Anthony family.
Right?
They were at the center of it all.
They were.
All that media scrutiny, the public anger.
Death threats, even.
Their lives were forever changed by this.
It's easy to get caught up in the legal drama,
Yeah.
all the media frenzy. But we can't forget the human impact.
Absolutely.
It took on everyone involved.
Regardless of their role in the case.
Right. The Anthony family went through a level of suffering and public condemnation.
It's hard to imagine.
Unfathomable, really.
And as the years went by, Casey continued to maintain her innocence. There were interviews, documentaries. The public's fascination with this case never really faded.
It didn't.
Everyone wanted that clear answer.
Right.
A resolution.
A conclusion.
But the truth, it remained elusive.
And just when you think all the pieces are out there,
Yeah.
a new piece of information emerges.
Oh, no.
It adds another layer of complexity
To an already very complex case.
to this perplexing case.
A bombshell from a 2012 news report reveals something that wasn't even part of the trial.
What's that?
On the day Caylee disappeared, a search for a foolproof suffocation was made.
Oh, my God.
On Casey's computer.
Wow.
It's crazy, right?
That's a game changer.
It really is, and it raises so many questions.
Like what?
Like, how did this not come up during the trial?
Yeah.
Would it have changed the jury's verdict?
It's impossible to say for sure
Yeah.
what impact this new information would have had.
Right.
But it really highlights how investigations are never truly closed.
Yeah.
New evidence can surface even years later.
Years later.
And the pursuit of the truth.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process. It doesn't just end.
So we've done this deep dive,
Yeah.
all these details, the evidence, the theories, the verdict.
And the question,
What are we left with?
I think we're left with a tragedy, a family forever marked by loss
Yeah.
and suspicion, and a case that keeps people talking and speculating.
And Caylee Anthony's death, it reminds us that sometimes, no matter how hard we try,
Yeah,
the truth remains out of reach.
it really does.
It's what makes this case so compelling, so frustrating, and ultimately so unforgettable.
Yeah, you can't forget this one.
It leaves us with those same questions that haunted the nation. What really happened to Caylee? Was justice served? And how do we make sense of the conflicting stories, the unanswered questions?
The questions that linger long after the trial's over.
Absolutely. That's what makes this case so powerful.
It does.
A reflection of our human need for certainty.
Right. We want to believe there's a reason for everything.
But life,
Life throws curveballs.
especially a case like this,
It forces us to confront the fact that we may never know everything.
that we might not have all the answers.
It's tough to accept sometimes.
I think what's interesting is how this case shows all the different ways we try to understand tragedy.
Yeah.
You see it in how the media is always looking for a narrative,
Right.
how the public rushes to judge,
Absolutely.
and how the legal system tries to create order out of chaos.
It's all about finding a framework,
Yeah.
a way to grasp something that just doesn't make easy sense.
And in the end, we're left with a family shattered by loss.
Yeah.
A little girl whose story ended way too soon.
Far too soon.
And a cloud of unanswered questions that just hangs over it all.
And it's those questions
Yeah.
that we leave with you, the listener.
The ones who are taking this deep dive with us.
If we've laid out the facts, the complexities, the different ways of seeing it all,
Yeah.
now it's your turn to decide what you make of it.
Do you agree with the prosecution?
Or do you side with the defense?
Do you think Casey's behavior is suspicious?
Or was she a victim of circumstance?
There's no easy answers.
No neat conclusions.
But that's the point of a deep dive like this.
Right.
We want to explore the nuances,
To wrestle with the unknowns.
to think critically about everything.
Exactly. And even though we may never know for sure what happened to Caylee Anthony, the act of examining the evidence, the different viewpoints, and struggling with the questions that remain.
That's where the learning happens.
It is.
So to everyone listening, keep digging, keep questioning, keep coming to your own conclusions.
the key.
The death of Caylee Anthony is a story that stays with you, a case that challenges us to think critically about justice, about truth, and our own limits of understanding.
It certainly is.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a case that shook the nation. And until next time,
Yeah.
keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the most important questions are the ones without easy answers.
Well said. I agree.
So we're in the courtroom, and this case, it's a national obsession at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just playing out in front of the judge and jury.
There you go.
It's like it's happening in everyone's living room,
Every night on the news.
fueled by that constant news coverage,
Yeah.
all the speculation online.
It really is a case study
Yeah,
in how media can shape what people think.
totally.
Every detail, every witness, all that evidence, It was analyzed and debated.
with very strong opinions on both sides.
Oh, yeah?
Sometimes it feels impossible to separate the actual legal case from the media circus.
Totally agree.
And in the middle of all of that, all that noise, the jury had this huge responsibility
It did, yeah.
to sift through everything, weigh the evidence and decide, did the prosecution prove their case?
Beyond a reasonable doubt, that's the standard.
That's the standard. And after weeks of testimony, mountains of evidence, they delivered their verdict.
What was it?
Not guilty on the murder charges.
Wow, I mean, that sent shockwaves through everyone.
People were outraged.
They were...
Protests erupted. Social media exploded with disbelief.
It was like another O.J. Simpson trial.
Right.
Where the acquittal of someone who seemed so obviously guilty ignited this huge debate about race, justice. Did the system fail?
It seems like everyone was convinced of Casey's guilt. So how could the jury reach a different conclusion?
It's so important to remember that the jury's decision, it was based on what they saw and heard in that courtroom.
In that room only.
And they were told to apply that standard.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
And clearly, for them, the prosecution's case, it left some room for doubt.
Some room for doubt.
We can speculate all day long about why.
Right.
But we weren't in that jury room.
We weren't there.
We don't know what they discussed.
But the jury did find Casey guilty on those 4 counts of providing false information.
Right. The lies.
Those lies about the nanny, the job at Universal.
Yeah, they came back to haunt her.
They really did.
And I think those convictions really show us something. They show us that the jury, they knew she was dishonest, that she tried to mislead the investigation.
And even if they weren't sure she was directly responsible for Caylee's death,
Well,
they held her accountable for those actions, those specific lies.
Exactly. And she did serve time for those convictions.
Not as much as a lot of people thought she deserved.
That's right.
But that difference, between how the public saw it and the legal outcome,
it's fascinating.
It highlights how complex the justice system really is.
Absolutely. And it shows the power of a good story.
What do you mean?
The prosecution, they had a strong narrative, but it was built on circumstantial evidence.
Right.
The defense, they managed to introduce enough doubt, enough alternative explanations to make the jury question the prosecution's version of events.
In this case, it didn't just end with the verdict.
Right.
There was this huge push for stricter laws about reporting missing children.
Caylee's
Law. And a lot of states, they actually implemented these laws.
Requiring parents to report within a certain time frame.
It's awful that it took such a tragic, high-profile case to bring attention to this issue.
And get those laws passed.
But at least Caylee's death led to some positive changes.
It did.
In how we protect children.
Absolutely.
And of course, the Anthony family.
Right. They were at the center of this media storm.
Public anger, death threats.
Their lives were changed forever.
It's easy to get caught up in the legal drama, the media frenzy, but we can't forget the human impact.
No, we can't.
It had on everyone involved.
The Anthony family endured a level of suffering and condemnation that most of us can't even imagine.
And years went by. Casey kept maintaining her innocence.
She did.
Interviews, documentaries.
The public never really lost interest in this case.
They wanted answers. They wanted a resolution.
They did? But the truth, it stayed elusive.
It did, and just when you think you've got all the pieces of the puzzle, another one emerges. A bombshell from a 2012 news report reveals something that wasn't even presented during the trial.
What is it?
On the very day Caylee disappeared, a search for foolproof suffocation was made on Casey's computer.
Wow, okay, that's huge.
This information, it came to light through Casey's own defense attorney, Jose Baez. He included it in his book about the case.
Interesting.
He suggested that maybe the search was made by George Anthony. Maybe a suicide attempt. But the fact remains that search originated from Casey's password-protected account.
So it was definitely her computer.
It's a mind-blowing detail.
It is.
It raises so many questions.
Like what?
How did this not come up during the trial? Would it have changed the jury's decision?
It's impossible to know for sure.
I know.
But it really highlights how these investigations, they're never truly over. New evidence can come out years later. And that pursuit of the truth, it's an ongoing process.
It really is. It's like, when you're putting a puzzle together, you think you've got all the pieces, you see the whole picture, and then
someone comes along.
Like, oh, hey, here's another piece you missed.
And it changes everything.
That's what this foolproof suffocation search feels like.
Yeah, that missing piece.
Suddenly the whole case looks different.
And makes you question not just Casey, but the whole legal process.
Right.
Like, what if this had come out during the trial?
Yeah.
Would the jury have decided differently?
Could it have tipped the scales?
We'll never know. But it shows how important it is to get everything right the first time around.
Absolutely. And it makes you think, what else is out there?
Right.
What other information could change how we see this story?
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Is there any chance we'll ever get a complete picture of what happened to Caylee?
That's what keeps people coming back to this case.
Yeah.
The need to understand, to make sense of something so senseless.
But sometimes, even with all the evidence, all the analysis,
The truth stays hidden.
it's tough.
It really is.
In this case, it shows how much we crave certainty. We want to believe there's a logical explanation for everything.
But life doesn't always work that way.
It throws curveballs.
Especially a case like this.
We have to face the possibility that we may never have all the answers.
That ambiguity is hard to deal with.
It really is.
What I find interesting is how this case reveals the different ways we try to make sense of tragedy.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, you see it in the media.
Right.
Constantly searching for a story, a narrative, the public, quick to judge, to form opinions.
And the legal system trying to impose order on something so chaotic.
Everyone's looking for a framework.
A way to understand something that just doesn't make easy sense.
Exactly.
And in the end, we're left with a family devastated by loss.
A little girl whose story ended far too soon.
And all those unanswered questions that just linger.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah, where does that leave the listeners?
The ones who've been on this deep dive with us?
We've gone through the facts,
The complexity?
the different interpretations.
Now it's up to each person to decide how they make sense of it all.
Do they agree with the prosecution?
Or are they swayed by the defense?
Do they see Casey's actions as suspicious?
Or was she a victim of circumstance?
There are no easy answers.
No simple conclusions.
That's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
We can explore the nuances,
Wrestle with those ambiguities.
engage in critical thinking.
And even though we may never know for certain what happened to Caylee Anthony,
Yeah.
examining the evidence, considering the different perspectives,
Grappling with those unanswered questions.
that's where the real learning happens.
Absolutely.
So keep digging, keep questioning, keep forming your own conclusions.
Don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions.
The death of Caylee Anthony, it's a story that sticks with you.
It does.
It makes us think critically about justice, truth, and the limits of what we can really know.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most important questions are the ones that don't have easy answers.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a case that captured the nation's attention. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged.
And remember, the truth is out there, somewhere.